the foods that you're eating all the time are the ones that are coming up, this is a clue that maybe you could have some leaky gut and there's some gut healing that needs to happen. And so it's a two-prong approach that we take with looking at the food sensitivity test, the foods you're sensitive to, but also looking at the health of your gut.
Welcome to Get Pregnant Naturally, where functional medicine and natural fertility solutions will help you get pregnant and have your baby. Hey everyone, I'm Sarah Clark. My mission is to inspire, motivate, and empower you. Most of all, I want you to wake up. With functional medicine, we can discover what causes infertility and eventually reverse the condition. Today, I'm welcoming back Brandy Buskow to the podcast. We're digging into why food sensitivity testing can give us clues about your fertility. So definitely check out episode number 6 for a functional medicine 101 talk, plus some look at some tools that we use to help couples to conceive. So let's give you a quick bio about Brandy. So Brandy is a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner, a certified transformational health coach, and an EFT practitioner, so emotional freedom technique practitioner. So it's tapping. She loves supporting women so they can learn how functional medicine addresses the underlying cause of disease or illness. Before we jump into today's show, don't forget to hit the subscribe button on iTunes or wherever you're listening to this to make sure you never miss an episode. So welcome back to the show, Brandy.
Thanks, Sarah. Thanks for having me back.
Awesome. So today we're going to be talking about some of our favorite topics here. One of our favorite topics is food sensitivity testing. So first of all, let's just talk about, why a food sensitivity test is a good place to start when someone's struggling with infertility, because it seems like almost the last place to start, whereas we're like, it's the first.
So that's a great question. We are eating food every single day, and because it's something that we have to take in every single day to sustain us, to give us energy, it's an important part of our life. And if we are eating foods that our body is reacting to or that our body is not agreeing with, that could be causing inflammation or causing some sort of reaction, then it's important to take a look at that and remove the foods that could be causing that for you. And each individual person is different. No one person or two people have the exact same reactions to foods that they eat. So by doing a food sensitivity test and eliminating those foods that we're sensitive to, we're actually giving the body the opportunity to kind of calm down, allowing our immune system to calm down a little bit, and also allowing some inflammation that could be going on under the surface to calm down, which gives our body the opportunity to begin to heal.
Yeah, totally. And both Brandy and I struggled with food sensitivities. Brandy was later diagnosed with celiac disease, but had all these different symptoms her whole life. So you can definitely check out Brandy's podcast on episode number 2, where she talks about, for her, it was a link with anxiety and food sensitivities and a whole host of other gut infections.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And then for me, you've heard my story where I found out years later. So for me, it's gluten, dairy, and corn that I've eliminated from my diet, and later a gut infection. So episode 0, you can check out my story as well on my website, fabfertile.com, fabfertile.com. But let's talk about, how do we measure inflammation in the body?
So there's a few ways of doing it. One of the more common tests that you can get run with your doctor would be an HSCRP, or high sensitive C-reactive protein. And that's just a marker that can give us some insight into how inflamed your body is. There's other ways that we can look at inflammation because we can't physically always see it. I mean, obviously, if you have swelling joints or things like acne is kind of a form of inflammation of the skin. Those are kind of some outward signs that you have some inflammation. But some other things that you could notice are things like joint pain, headaches, even so much as like bloating, gas and bloating, or if you've noticed that you've been, working out and you feel like you've been eating right, but yet you're still gaining weight, or you're, putting on a lot of weight in the middle. Those are all kind of signs of inflammation. And that's a good time to do what we do when we work with our couples, is take the functional approach and let's look at all of the lifestyle factors that can be contributing to that. And one of those factors is definitely food, because as I mentioned before, we all have to eat every day. So if we're eating foods every day that we don't know we're sensitive to, that could be causing a lot of inflammation and causing our immune system to be on high alert. And then that has a downstream effect of affecting our hormones, our fertility, and our health in general.
Yeah, absolutely. And we Brandy and I go into detail. We've got another podcast coming up shortly in about 4 or 5 episodes after this, talking about the elimination diet, which really is the gold standard. And we have people do the elimination diet after they've done the food sensitivity testing. But in there, we talk about all the symptoms, that you could be having. But as Brandy mentioned, it could affect your skin. So for me, it was acne, but it could be psoriasis, hives, skin rashes, dermatitis, could be joint issues. So if you've got swelling of joints or arthritis, stiff joints, digestion, a lot of people think the food intolerance thing or sensitivity is only digestion, but that is only just one of them. So it's digestion. So constipation, it's normal to go 1 to 3 times a day. Constipation can be a sign. Diarrhea, loose stools, IBS, like Brandy was mentioning. So bloating, gas, for years I had that kind of this little bloated stomach, and now it's gone away for me because I had these food sensitivities. Mood, Brandy struggled with anxiety for years. So anxiety, depression, ADD, mood swings, irritability. And for me, that's one for me was irritability. My poor husband, irritability. And then autoimmune. So MS, diabetes type 1, Hashimoto's, Graves, lupus, all those autoimmune issues could be linked back. So those are, again, kind of clues. Again, to listen, we always say to listen to what your body is saying. So clues, there could be inflammation in your body.
Mm-hmm.
So, and we've had women get pregnant just by like reading my book. So Fabulously Fertile, taking the recipes from my cookbook. So the Fabulously Fertile cookbook, and that's, removing the top allergen. So for them, maybe just removing gluten. And, after years of struggling, they've been able to conceive. But everyone is different. And there's not one diet that works for everyone. We really believe in that personalized approach, as we talked about using testing as a foundation of this to see. Brandy and I may not be able to tolerate gluten, but maybe you can. So it's just to really see what's going to be right for you.
Yeah, for sure. And like I said, everybody is different. No two people are the same when it comes to how they're going to react to certain foods.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And as we said, part of our couples coaching program, we have them start with a food sensitivity test, and then they do the elimination diet, and they really begin to understand how food impacts their body. Mm-hmm. So let's kind of go into the difference between a food allergy, so that immediate reaction, and a food intolerance or sensitivity. Can you share a little bit about that for us?
Sure. So when we talk about food sensitivity, a lot of times people will think to an actual food allergy, like somebody who's allergic to peanuts or shellfish. And those are the type of people where if it's in the air or they're exposed to it, they kind of get this anaphylactic type reaction where it's an immediate, their lips may swell, they may immediately get hives, their throat starts to close up, their tongue starts swelling. I mean, these are immediate reactions that tend to be or can be life-threatening. And these are the type of people that need to carry around EpiPens with them, because if they are exposed to something like that, they need to be able to give themselves that shot right away to reduce the reaction. Now, an intolerance is different, and I think these days we're so rushed all the time that we don't take the time to really tune in to our body and to the clues that it's giving us. And so with the food sensitivity, you may not have a reaction for a few days. So, I mean, some people, it can be a delayed reaction within a few hours. So for instance, with myself, if I have dairy, within a few hours, I'll start to feel a little achy, or I'll start to feel like I've got some sinus congestion building up. The same is true for gluten. I can usually figure that out within a few hours because I just start to not feel well. I get headaches. But for other people, that intolerance could be a headache that you get 2 days after you've eaten the food. Or it could be, it's very common for people who are sensitive to dairy to have dairy and then the next day they wake up and they have acne that wasn't there before. Those are some things that would be considered a delayed reaction or a food sensitivity rather than a food allergy.
Yeah, and that's the people you never really connect the dots. So the bread you have on Friday, on Monday morning, you're like, why do I have these headaches? Or why do I all of a sudden have acne? Or why are my joints stiff? And you just think that's either you getting older or that's just your genetic makeup that you're meant to feel this way. And that's not the case.
Right. And it's so true that I'm getting older. I mean, that's something that's really common. We see a lot of times people going to the doctors and saying, just I feel headachy, I'm just tired all the time, my head's in a fog. And sometimes doctors will just say, well, you're getting older and that's what happens. And that's so not true. I mean, we don't have to say to ourselves at 35 or 40 years old, I'm getting older. We shouldn't feel that way,
Mhm.
And we've kind of almost gotten to the point where this is like a way of life. This is just normal to feel this way. And it really isn't. And when you do a food sensitivity test or you do an elimination diet and you remove these foods and you start to feel what it feels like to feel good and have a clear head, and then you eat a food that you're sensitive to and you actually can see what it feels like, it's like, whoa, it's not worth me eating that because I actually had a clear head for a week that I haven't experienced. I haven't experienced this clarity in mind for months, even years in a lot of instances.
Yeah, this is something we work with our coaching program because it is sometimes you are intolerant to your favorite food, which can suck. And then, you may have it again and again, even after you know that it makes you feel not great. So it's really, again, being able to, like, the food sensitivity test is only the beginning, because we've had people take the test and go, whoop, toss it over the shoulder and not do anything about it. It is actually the connection going, okay, wait, I know on the test here, it says I'm intolerant to XYZ, or Z for Americans, to know how it impacts my body and to really clue into that and see kind of how, what that is for you. It's powerful to understand that, but in the beginning, you might just kind of slip up a little bit. People call it cheating, but more like slipping up. And then the next day you're like, okay, that's how I felt. I'll remember that next time. So I
Yeah,
won't
for
do it again.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and one of the things that, and I may get a little sciencey here, but I'll try to not go too deep. But one of the things that is related to food sensitivities is this term called leaky gut. And so I always like to use an analogy that I heard from Dr. Tom O'Brien about thinking of your gut as a cheesecloth. So normally you've got these little tiny holes, which we need because we need to be able to allow the nutrients from our food to pass through the gut so that it can get to our cells and nourish us and do the things it needs to do. But if we are eating foods that we are sensitive to, we're under a lot of stress, which everybody in this world in this day and age is under. What begins to happen is those holes start to get bigger and bigger. It's like you're poking bigger holes in this cheesecloth. And when that happens, larger particles of the food that you're eating can pass through the gut wall. And when the immune system sees those larger particles, they think it's an invader. And so they start mounting a response. They're like a little army that comes out and they say, this is foreign, this is a bad guy, we don't need it in the system. And they start to create antibodies. And then you become sensitive and start getting symptoms because of these foods that you're eating. And a lot of times we have people who've come back and we've done food sensitivity tests and they've had a bunch of things on the test that they eat all the time. And this is where we explain to them that when we look at a food sensitivity test, we don't just look at the foods that come up and we say, okay, let's take that out. We also look at it and say, the foods that you're eating all the time are the ones that are coming up. This is a clue that maybe you could have some leaky gut and there's some gut healing that needs to happen. And so it's a two-prong approach that we take with looking at the food sensitivity test, the foods you're sensitive to, but also looking at the health of your gut.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's dig into some of the different tests. So we have a couple ones that are favorite of that we like, but there's a number of different tests in the market, so it can be kind of confusing. So we're going to just review some of the more popular ones and give you kind of the pros and cons of them. So yeah, so do you want to start? We'll start with the Cyrex food test.
Sure. So the Cyrex test, Cyrex has a lot of really great tests. They do have a food sensitivity test that they do that looks at 180 different foods. The nice thing about the Cyrex test is they look at both cooked and raw versions of the foods. So that is a bonus. That's a pro of this test. It is really well researched. They have a really good research team, and they are possibly able to pick up gluten sensitivities that other tests can't, just because they are one of the labs that is one of the more accurate ones for checking for gluten sensitivity. The downside of the Cyrex test, it is very expensive. So it's almost $600, which is expensive. Plus, if you pay for your blood draw. You're paying a little bit of extra out of pocket. And the other issue with this test is that in order to determine if you're sensitive to a food, you must be eating the specific food that they're checking for at least 7 days and then wait another 21 days. So essentially a whole month, because it takes about that long for your body to create an antibody to the food for it to show up on the test. So if you're somebody who has suspected that you had gluten sensitivity or you were sensitive to dairy, you may not want to be eating gluten or dairy for 7 days straight just to see if it shows up on the test. And so that's a little bit of a downfall of the Cyrex test.
Okay, so that's the Cyrex food test. And again, yeah, it's, I guess, a test for both cooked and raw foods. And what's the benefit of doing that? I guess some of the other tests.
So with the cooked and raw foods, I mean, a lot of the other tests will check one or the other, whereas the structure of the foods change a little bit when you cook them. And so you might see somebody who does well with raw fish, but not cooked fish. And so then it gives them a little bit more flexibility in their diet. Or the same can be true with eggs. They may not do well with raw eggs, but cooked eggs, they do well with. So that could be a benefit because then it gives you a little bit more flexibility, and it is looking at a lot of foods, whereas some other tests aren't looking at as many foods like the Cyrex test does.
Okay, but really the downfall of this one is that, if you potentially know you already have some intolerances and then you're going to be forced to eat some of the food and feel like garbage for 7 days. Yeah, you got to eat it, ingest it. So that's kind of definitely a downfall. Okay.
Sure.
Yeah, the next one we have is the IgG, the dry blood spot test.
Yeah, so this one's been around for a long time. There's several different labs that do it. The nice thing about this test is that it can be done from home, so you don't actually physically have to go to a blood draw center and have your blood drawn. So if you're somebody who really doesn't like doing that, that's a bonus. It's fairly inexpensive, so it's about $220, $230 US for it. There is a lot of science behind the IgG testing just because it has been around for so long. And most IgG tests are looking for the most common consumed foods. So that's a benefit, but it also can be a downfall of the IgG test because it only checks about 100 different foods. So it may miss things that, it doesn't do like 500 foods where it's only going to do the most common things. So it could miss some things. And there are some different variations of IgG blood tests. So if you're a vegetarian, there's usually a vegetarian panel that we can choose from. So it'll contain more common vegetarian foods. And it also has an Asian food panel. So if you are somebody who eats a lot of Asian foods, such as miso, shiitake mushrooms, those sorts of things, we could choose a panel that would be more suited to the common foods that you eat. So just to reiterate, it's the simplicity, it's fairly inexpensive, and it can kind of get to the point rather quickly and look at the most common foods. Now, some of the cons of the IgG test is, again, it only tests for 100 foods. You do have to do a finger stick. So if you're somebody who gets really nauseous at the sight of blood, you have to be able to prick your own finger and drop blood on a piece of cardboard paper. So if that's something that you can't do, that is a drawback of this test.
Yeah, I actually had a little problem with that. I remember they give you 2 little finger sticks in there, and for some reason I don't know how I did it, but I broke the first one, and then the second one, something happened to both of them, whatever it was. And so then I'm like, oh my goodness, how am I going to like prick my finger? And so I thought, well, I'll get a little knife and like cut. And then no, I couldn't do that. I'm like, I don't know how, like panicked. And then I was able to like, eventually the one, I guess I thought that didn't work. I was able to like squeeze and squeeze and squeeze my finger. But yeah, I could see, and I don't normally get dizzy or nauseous by the sight of blood, but I definitely had some issues with the finger stick.
Yeah.
But it is easy to do it at home. And eventually I was able to get because there's four little blood spots that you
Yes.
squeeze your little finger onto. So yeah.
Yeah, so people are familiar with pricking their finger for checking blood sugar at home. It's similar to that, but you require more blood than you would just to check your blood sugar. So that's a benefit, but it's also a drawback. So like Sarah said, if you're somebody who's really queasy about that, you may not want to do this test. Now, one of the other cons, a lot of them don't check for chemicals in food additives, which is a bit of a drawback because there's a lot of times people are sensitive to additives in foods like food colorings and MSG. So these tests generally don't check for that. And this test actually does not pick up non-immune responses like histamine intolerance or a lectin intolerance. So it's a good test because it's cost efficient. You could do it at home, but it doesn't check for everything.
Just back up on that. Can you elaborate on the histamine for people? On did you say lactin?
Lectins.
So like the LECTIN.
Yes. So histamine intolerance, these are people that if you have wine, a lot of people that are sensitive to fermented foods, so wine, pickled foods, kombucha, even some cheeses because they're fermented in a way. And if you kind of get this response, like you get a flush or you suddenly get a headache or you feel really weird after you eat those foods, that can be a histamine response. And so if you're somebody that's having that sort of response to foods, this IgG test won't pick that up. And then the other thing we talked about is lectins. And so some foods, actually there's quite a few foods that have lectins, which is a protective mechanism on the food that protects them from being eaten. And some people do have a sensitivity to the lectins in foods, and IgG tests don't check for that.
Okay. Yeah, I have a histamine thing. So when I have wine, it's like my face starts flushing. So I'm like, yep. Okay, the next one we have is the ALCAT test, ALCAT test.
Yes. So this is a very popular test. Again, it's been around for a really long time. There is a lot of science around it. And what the ALCAT test measures is the individual responses to foods and supplements and substances, sorry. And one of the things that's good about the ALCAT test is that there are a lot of panels out there and it can test for hundreds of food additives. So if you're somebody who has the money, because it's a very expensive test, and you want to look at a lot of different things, the ALCAT would be the way to go because there are panels, I believe, that can look up to 600 different foods, additives, and things in the environment that you can be sensitive to. And the way it works is it's a patented technology that was invented and to look at the different responses that the body can have. Now, again, like we mentioned, a pro is that it does look for several different types of foods, food additives, molds, herbs, supplements. A con is that it can be quite expensive. So their lowest panel, I think, is around $400, and you can get a panel up to $1,200, and it does require a blood draw. So as I said, if you're somebody who money is not an issue and you want to look for all these things, ALCAT may be a good way to go. But if you're on a budget, it may not be the best test for you to look at.
Okay. And then the next one we have is the LEAP MRT, and this is one a test that we like.
So the LEAP MRT stands for Mediator Release Test, and this is a test that uses a technology where it's looking at changes in red blood cells, and which is a measure of how the immune system is reacting to the foods. So when the immune system sends out their signals that to an invader coming into the body, they send out these certain chemicals like histamines and cytokines and prostaglandins, and these are just technical terms for the different hormones and chemicals that the immune system can release in response to what they consider a foreign invader. And what they do with the MRT is they actually look under the microscope and they observe changes in your blood cells when certain food proteins are introduced. And so if they observe a change like they swell or they shrink, that is considered an immune reaction to the food. And the nice thing about the MRT is that unlike the IgG test and the Cyrex test, you don't need to be consuming the foods. So this is good for somebody who, if you suspect that you have gluten sensitivity or dairy sensitivity and you don't want to have to eat those foods for at least a week, you wouldn't have to with the MRT test. It's not required for you to do that. And a blind peer-reviewed study of the MRT found it to have the highest level of accuracy. So it's about 94-95% sensitive. So it is a really great test. Now, having said that, there is no perfect test out there, and the LEAP MRT checks for currently 170 different foods and food additives. So it's not as many as the Cyrex and it's not as many as the Alcat, but it does have some other positives that go with it. Now, the cons to the MRT test is it'll a bit more expensive, so about $350, $330 if you're getting it through a practitioner. It is available in the United States, in some places overseas, like in Europe, in Canada, but because it requires a blood draw, it tends to be a little bit more difficult to get overseas. So it's a test that we generally just recommend to people we work with in the United States.
Okay. Yeah. And so that typically we would recommend that our first place to start would be with the LEAP MRT, depending on location of the person. And then next one would be the IgG.
Yes, yes. And like I said, there is no perfect test. And Sarah mentioned this at the beginning of the podcast, that the gold standard is an elimination diet. That really is the best way to check, by eliminating a whole host of foods for a certain amount of time and then slowly reintroducing and observing how your body reacts. Because of the ability for our body to, with the leaky gut going on, we can get some situations where we've seen this often, where foods are coming up that we're sensitive to, but it could be just because we have leaky gut, we have some other things going on. And so just because you're sensitive to it now and we do a food sensitivity test doesn't mean you're never going to be able to eat that food again.
Mm-hmm. As we heal the gut, and if there's gut infections on in there, then these things can improve.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess and then there's also some cross reactors. I just wanted to kind of go into, actually, I'm just going to back up for a minute. So yeah, with the elimination diet, we'll be doing an in-depth episode about that, and as I say, in 5 or 6 episodes from this one. But just right now, if you're listening to it, so the top allergens that we recommend to take out for 10 days are dairy, gluten, corn, eggs, soy, and peanuts. So you take those out for 10 days, and then you systematically reintroduce them. My fertility preparation program will help you, will guide you through that, or you can simply do it by yourself. It's just reintroducing them and making sure that you're really, like, the reintroduction period is the most important, making sure you're using a symptom checklist and seeing how you're feeling. But as I say, we're going to go into that in more detail in a little while. And as far as some cross reactors to gluten, because some people will think, oh, I'm gluten free, and there still could be inflammation in the body because there's other foods that can still mount an immune response in your body and could have give a similar reaction, or I guess the body actually sees them as gluten.
Yeah, so this is a good point. With the food sensitivity testing, there's no test out there that I'm aware of that checks for all of the different components of wheat or gluten. So even though you might come back on some tests as being okay to consume wheat, it may not necessarily be true. And the best way to measure that is to eliminate it from your diet, because there are so many different gluten proteins that it's possible for you to be sensitive to. And the same is true for dairy. Dairy is one of those ones that there's many different components to dairy, and a lot of tests will only just say dairy rather than the components like lactose, casein, whey. And if it was broken down like that, then it would be easier for us to see if you're just sensitive to one part. So again, with dairy, it's best to just eliminate it completely, because there is no test really that breaks down the components of dairy the way it should. And so when we're talking about cross reactors, what that means is when we consume a food, there are some other foods that are similar or in a different family of foods, but their proteins look the same. So when we ingest the food and our body is digesting it and the proteins start to get absorbed, and if we have a leaky gut, so like we talked about, those larger particles of the food are traveling through and the immune system says, hey, this is an invader. What can happen with cross reactions, and this is especially true with gluten, is that the proteins look very similar. And so the immune system might say, well, that's a gluten protein and we don't like that and let's attack it. But it may not even be gluten. It may be corn. It may be potatoes. It may be amaranth or barley. It could be chocolate. It could be coffee. These are all foods that are common cross reactors to gluten that your body or your immune system can mistake for gluten and mount a response and send the troops out to attack that because it's a foreign invader. So there's a really large list, and Sarah, you're probably going to give them a link in the show notes, but the Paleo Mom has a really good list of potential cross reactors with gluten. And so if you are gluten free, but you're still kind of symptomatic, it may be a good idea for you to look at some of these cross reactors and remove them for a period of time to see if one of them is actually causing the symptoms that you're having.
Yeah, so that's what the Paleo Mom. I'm going to quickly go through them now. So it's barley, spelt, Polish wheat. I'm not sure what Polish wheat is. Do you know what that is?
I think it's a different form of wheat that maybe they can get overseas, like in Europe. It's
Okay.
not, I don't think it's a wheat that we would see in North America normally.
Okay, oats, which is always get gluten-free oats. Then even don't even take oats, don't even use oats. Buckwheat, sorghum, millet, amaranth, quinoa, corn, rice, potato, which is sort of a surprising one. Hemp, teff, soy, milk, chocolate, yeast, coffee, so instant, latte, espresso, imported, sesame, tapioca, or which is also known as cassava or yucca, and eggs. And I'll put that
Yes.
list. Mm-hmm.
It's a big list. And I mean, we definitely, when we're working with people, and if somebody does come back sensitive to gluten, or if they've done the elimination diet and they bring gluten back in and they notice a reaction, we talk about these things because they definitely do cross react for sure. Oats is a very, very big one. Dairy is a very, very big one. And unfortunately, so is chocolate and coffee. They're the most common ones. And people will find that, I've done all of these things, and then we talk about them, but they just can't get rid of their coffee. And a lot of times that could be cross reacting and not allowing our immune system to calm down, not allowing that inflammation to come down. And so by taking that little extra step and removing those cross reactors, some people can see a really big benefit.
Yeah, again, your survival. So if there's inflammation in your body, the body wants to survive. It doesn't want to procreate. So it's really important to address these things to then reduce the inflammation in your body.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. So let's just kind of, when we work with clients, so kind of share with you what we do here. So we start with a food diary, and we have them do a food diary, typically, I don't know, maybe five to 7 days, or even a couple days is good, but 5 to 7 days would be a good start. And then it's quite a detailed form that we give them. So maybe can you share a little bit about that, Brandy?
Sure. So the food diary is an opportunity for you to write down the foods that you're eating, so what you had for breakfast, and then it asks a series of questions that has you kind of take some time to tune into your body and see how it's feeling. So we ask questions like, did that meal energize me? Was I hungry an hour later? Did my mood change? Did I have a clear mind? I mean, these are all things that, because we're in a go, go, go all the time, we don't typically stop to ask ourselves whenever we eat. And so it's a good opportunity for you to learn to slow down and step back and tune into your body and ask these questions. And by doing that, it can kind of give you some clues as to, well, I had oatmeal for breakfast today, and I kind of got a brain fog right away, and I was craving some sweets like 30 minutes later. And a lot of times, like I said, we don't notice that, but by tuning in and seeing that, we could say, well, maybe oatmeal is not the best thing for me. Maybe I need to add some more fat to my meal. Maybe I need some more protein to make me feel more satiated, to make me have more energy. So this is why we do the food diary, because it helps you to tune into your body, but then it also helps us because we kind of have a second look and can see from the outside looking in type of idea, giving us some clues on maybe there's some blood sugar situations or irregularities. Maybe there's some imbalances and you're not eating enough food. This is actually very common. I see this a lot. We as women are just afraid of things like fats. And so we're always going around taking quick snacks, a lot of times some carbohydrate heavy foods, not having enough protein and fat. And we actually do need a good amount to feel satiated, to balance our blood sugar. And the proteins and fats are important for hormone health. So this is another thing that we commonly see is even under eating. And looking at the food diary can help us see that, and we talk through it as we go through the days and the symptoms that you're noticing while you're eating.
Yeah, definitely go out and check out our episode about healthy fats. That's episode number, I think it's number 15, where we talk about the baby's brain is made of fat, and the importance of having healthy fats in your diet.
Mm-hmm.
So you can check that out. It's episode number 16 for healthy fats. Check that out. And as far as, so let's kind of go through the test as, so basically we during the test, we review the food diary, and then we also, there's specific criteria on the test. So let's kind of go through that and some recommendations that we typically would have.
Sure. So, I mean, each test is a little bit different on how they report information. So, for instance, on the MRT, we kind of get a bar graph where we'll see green, yellow, and red. So, kind of like go, caution, and stop. And the IG test is similar. There's not the colors, but there's a bar that gives us kind of a measure on how sensitive or how reactive your body is being to the foods. So the more reactive, in the instance of the MRT, if it is in the red, so if you, let's say, had a bar that went into the red for carrots, for instance, then we would definitely recommend anything in the red to take out for a minimum of 3 months. And that's a minimum. It may be longer, but a bare minimum would be 3 months or 90 days. Now, if we see foods that come back as caution or yellow, those are foods that we recommend you take out for at least 60 to 90 days, but 90 days again would be ideal. And then anything that is lower, so that bar graph is really low and it's in the green, those are kind of the go foods. Now, the important thing to know about the go foods, if you've done your own food sensitivity test or you've in the past, is that even though it's green or it's okay and you're not showing any sort of reaction to it, it's important to remember that we need to have variety and we need to rotate our foods. It's not a good idea, and it's hard because we all have these habits and it's just easier to do the same thing every single day, but it's a really good idea to rotate your foods and not have the same things every single day, week after week.
Yeah, especially if you have leaky gut, then leaky gut, you end up mounting like to your favorite food that you could be having that avocado, even though it's healthy every day. And then next thing you know, your body has mounted an immune response to it.
Yes, and we see this so often. I've seen situations where people are having turmeric because it's really good, it's anti-inflammatory, it's good for the brain, and they have so much of it, and they had some leaky gut, and it came up red on a food sensitivity test. And I remember that my client at the time saying, "Oh my goodness, like I'm never going to be able to have this again." And that's where we kind of take that step back and we say, "Okay, it's not forever. Let's do some deeper testing." And that's why we don't just do a food sensitivity test, we go deeper, and let's do some gut healing. Let's reduce all of the things that in your body and in your life that can be creating stress, could be creating inflammation, and let's try to reduce those and allow the body to do what it naturally wants to do, which is heal and be in a state of balance. And by doing that, we can eventually reintroduce foods. And that really is the goal. The goal is to allow your body enough time to heal and repair the gut as it needs to so that you can reintroduce these foods, which a lot of times are very healthy in your diet, but then remember to rotate them and not eat them every single day. We see this very commonly with eggs because it's so easy for us to just have eggs for breakfast every morning. I had a situation where I had pineapple because it was so good and I loved it, and I ate pineapple and took a supplement with pineapple in it almost every day for a year, and I still can't have pineapple now because my body just became really sensitive to it. So it's really, really important to rotate and get variety in your diet.
Absolutely. And yeah, and just to reiterate about the foods, because we have had people that just are trying to conceive and they hear about, because I talk about my story with food sensitivity. I'm very vocal about that and how I discovered this later on, having POF and then basically premature ovarian failure, and then later on discovering I had the food sensitivity. But to just do a food sensitivity test, you're not going to necessarily get the results you're looking for because it's only part of the picture. And we don't want you to get frustrated if you've done a food sensitivity test and now you're like, oh, I've eliminated all these foods. Why am I not pregnant? Well, there could be a hormonal imbalance due to the fact that you have a gut infection. There could be other things going on. So it's just only part of the equation.
Yeah, it's a good starting point, especially, if you are on a budget and you want to start, it's a good starting point. But as you said, Sarah, it doesn't give us the whole picture. I mean, you could be having issues with digesting your food. Maybe you've been on birth control for 15 years and didn't know that it actually affects your body's ability to absorb nutrients. So you could be lacking nutrients. And so just eliminating the foods isn't going to take care of aiding your digestion completely or allowing your body to absorb the nutrients that it's needing or balance hormones, or even let's say you have gut infections like bacterial infections or parasites. These are all things that can have an effect. So while food is a good place to start, there's definitely a lot more things to think about and to look at and to dig deeper so that we can kind of do a whole lifestyle approach and give you the best possible tools and information to get on that journey to heal your body, allow your body to do what it naturally wants to do, and hopefully balance hormones so that it can improve fertility.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so as recommended, we recommend that the LEAP MRT test, as we say, you can get that throughout the U.S., except New York State. You've got to take it, you have to do the blood draw outside of New York State.
Yeah, so New York is a little bit difficult, but if you live in New York, it doesn't mean you can't do the MRT test. It just means you would have to travel out of state to have your blood drawn for this test.
Mm-hmm. And then elsewhere, we'd recommend the IgG and all of these kits. We ship them internationally, so it's super easy. Just basically, we ship them off, then we do a consult. So as part of our couples coaching program, we do the food sensitivity test. We do the Dutch test. So I've got Dr. Carrie Jones, who's the medical director of Dutch. She'll be coming on to talk about the Dutch test. The episode's not going to air until probably July. She'll be talking about that. And then we also, as we were talking about, do a stool test. We use the GI map stool test. Again, you can go back to episode number 6, and we talk about all the testing and things that we do in our couples coaching program. But really, and then it's developing that personalized diet and lifestyle program that's personalized diet that's really just for you, and lifestyle strategies that are just for you. And then we dig into that emotional mindset and using coaching to help you deal with, because we can have this pristine diet, and we're talking in these the next episodes here, we're talking a lot about diet, and in the beginning of the podcast for the first 3 months we talked a lot about mindset. So again, you can have a perfect mindset, but then if you're eating cheeseburger, not necessarily going to get the results that you want. And likewise, this perfect pristine diet that's totally customized for you, but then you've got all these mindset and a lot of emotional heartache and struggling to conceive. It's, to me, we believe in a holistic approach, and so it's all of it, not all at once, but taking that targeted approach.
Yeah, you can't out diet a bad lifestyle where you're not sleeping and you're over exercising and you're super stressed, but you also can't out meditate eating a poor diet. So it's everything. All of the components are really, really important. You can't just do one thing. It's all the lifestyle things. And I mean, as a health coach, I don't have a perfect diet. There's still times when I struggle. There's still times where there's foods that I know my body doesn't do well with, but I still want to eat. And so it's a struggle for everyone. And that's why we try to give you the support that you need, because we know that it's hard. It's not easy to make all of these changes. And we're there to kind of cheer you on and help you along the way so that you can get to where you want to get to.
Yeah, totally. So feel free to, you can check out in the link in the show notes. There's a link if you wanted to book a free call, and we can see, we can talk about the food sensitivity testing and see if that's going to be right for you, and talk about the couples coaching program as well. So there's a link in the podcast for that. Anything else, Brandy, as far as the food sensitivity testing that we haven't touched on?
So the only other thing I wanted to mention is, this isn't just important for women. This is also important for men as well. So, men are just as affected by how food can impact their body. So, if you're a couple that's going through infertility or struggling with some health issues, maybe both of you look at doing some testing or doing elimination diet. There's no harm in doing it, and it's only going to improve your health in the long run.
Absolutely. Yeah. Typically we work with women that are struggling with infertility, and the partner comes along and joins us in the program, and typically we'll do the elimination diet with their partner and make these diet and lifestyle changes and mindset shifts along the way. But also we've had the partner that wants to do some additional testing as well to get their health and the optimum range, because really we talk about healthy healthy parents, healthy pregnancy, healthy baby. It's future generations.
For sure. It's very, very important.
Awesome. Great. Well, thanks for coming on the podcast again, Brandy. Love talking about this, and have yourself a wonderful day, everyone.
Thank you.
Hey there, Sarah Clark here. So are you struggling to have your baby? First of all, please know that my heart goes out to you. I support couples worldwide who are struggling with infertility to conceive and have healthy babies. Women like Rita, who gave birth to her beautiful daughter after following my fertility coaching system. Or Danielle, who after 2 failed IUIs was able to get pregnant after a supercharger fertility discovery call with me. So here's how you get my help for free. So I offer a free supercharger fertility discovery call, and on that call, I'll create a plan with you that is going to help you fast track your success. So this call is not for everyone, and I'm really picky about who I get to speak with. And I have a strict but totally reasonable criteria that needs to be met in order for us to move forward. So here's who I can help. So first of all, you need to be able to explore your infertility diagnosis in a new light. So this offers for people who are open-minded, they're coachable, and if you can do that and want to double or triple your chances at the fertility clinic or get pregnant, awesome. So let's get on the phone and chat. Also, you must be an action taker. So someone who's committed to seeing results, you're able to follow directions. Don't worry, I'm not going to ask you to do anything bizarre. But if you're one of those people who like to consume a ton of information, but don't like to spend time implementing and seeing results, then the call's not really for you. So I only want to spend time with people who are genuinely committed to their own success. So just click on the link in the show notes and apply, or go to fabfertile.com and click on the free consult. So it's a really short application that just tells you about your health, how long you've been trying to conceive, and how soon you'd like to be pregnant. So seriously, this is going to be the best time you've ever spent on your fertility. Looking forward to chatting. Talk soon. Thank you for listening to Get Pregnant Naturally. Seriously, it means the world to me that you're here. Make sure you hit the subscribe button so you can be notified of upcoming episodes. I'm excited to offer you a special gift. If you are a U.S. resident, text FERTILE, FERTILE, to 345345. You'll be prompted to enter your email address, and you will receive our 3-day free fertility diet challenge. The challenge includes delicious chef-prepared recipes that are specifically designed to enhance your fertility. Download the recipes and try them this weekend. For U.S. residents, text FERTILE, FERTILE, to 345345. For non-U.S. residents, go to www.fertilitydietfreebie.com to access your special gift. That is Fertility Diet Freebie, FERTILITY, Diet, DIET, freebie, FREEBIE.com to access the 3-day free fertility diet challenge. And I love this quote by Dr. Mark Hyman. He's the medical director of the Cleveland Clinic Center for Functional Medicine and the chairman of the Institute for Functional Medicine. What you find at the end of your fork is more powerful than anything you'll find at the bottom of a pill bottle. Thanks again for listening. Until next time.